March 1994, Montreal, Canada. The streets of Montreal hum with the clatter of everyday life, streetcars rattle along rails, cafes fill with the aroma of coffee and bread, and university students drift between lectures. In the basement of a small apartment building, a photocopier hums under fluorescent lights, and a group of young writers hunch over desks littered with ink-stained drafts and crumpled flyers. This is where Vice begins. Not as a media empire, but as a countercultural newsletter, raw and defiant, filled with irreverence and obsession with subcultures that mainstream media ignored. Shane Smith, Sarush Alvi, and Gavin McInnes are not yet industry magnates. They are teenagers and 20-somethings with curiosity as their currency. They do not yet understand venture capital, billion-dollar valuations, or the pressures of global digital media. They understand questions. How can a story be told differently? How can the unseen, ignored, and absurd be documented without apology? How can their voices, raw and unpolished, disrupt the ordinary flow of information? Vice is built on audacity. It thrives on the uncomfortable, the provocative, the ignored. Stories about squatters, drug culture, underground music, and the fringes of society are not designed to appeal. They are designed to exist. To exist is a rebellion against invisibility. Their first readers are a few hundred people who pass flyers hand to hand, subscribe, and spread word of mouth. Growth is not measured in millions. It is measured in attention, respect, and survival. By the early 2000s, Vice had expanded beyond the photocopier and the basement walls. The newsletter becomes a magazine, then a network of content, online platforms, and video. They are no longer writing only for locals. They are speaking to a generation worldwide that craves authenticity over polish, experience over authority, and risk over comfort. The founders retain their outsider tone, their gritty humor, their disdain for convention. They still operate with a sense of rebellion, as if the world has yet to catch up with them. And yet, somewhere in this growth, ambition begins to shadow authenticity. The magazine is gaining readers. Advertisers appear. Brands that once seemed incompatible with counterculture now see an opportunity. Vice is invited into boardrooms, lunches, and digital ad networks. Money flows in. Investors begin to appear. Venture capitalists arrive with promises of scale, reach, and dominance. A world previously measured in ideas is now measured in dollars and projections. By 2017, Vice Media reached its zenith, or at least the appearance of it. The company secures funding, valuing it at $5.7 billion. The narrative is irresistible. A scrappy countercultural magazine has become a digital media powerhouse. Boardrooms applaud, venture capitalists cheer, and headlines call Vice the future of journalism. The founders are not just rebels anymore. They are billion-dollar executives. The irony is subtle, but devastating. Growth and valuation now dominate the story, eclipsing the very ethos that made Vice unique. The growth at all costs strategy replaces curiosity. Expanding video content, global bureaus, immersive documentaries, and branded partnerships take precedence over journalistic integrity. Pressure from investors transforms audacity into a metric: clicks, shares, engagement, and monetization. Risk becomes calculable, content optimized, shock replaced by strategy. The world of digital media is shifting even as Vice soars. Google and Meta are absorbing advertising dollars at unprecedented rates. Algorithms dictate attention. User data defines value. The audacity that once propelled Vice now collides with the precision of tech giants that operate at a scale almost unimaginable. What worked as rebellion in print and small-scale video struggles to compete with platforms optimized for speed, reach, and monetization. Meanwhile, internal turbulence simmers. Staff grow frustrated with shifting priorities. Content teams feel the tension between journalistic ambition and financial metrics. Ambition, once collective, becomes fragmented. Headquarters expand to multiple cities, yet the connection between mission and operation frays. Decisions are made less by editorial instinct and more by board directives, investor expectations, and projected growth. culture, once the lifeblood, is now a secondary concern. By 2018, cracks will become visible. Revenue projections falter. Video production costs spiral. Partnerships with tech platforms prove lucrative but unstable. Investments in edgy content, once a hallmark, are now constrained by the same investors who praised audacity. Reports emerge of workplace mismanagement and allegations of harassment, shaking confidence both internally and externally. Public perception becomes as volatile as the digital algorithms that drive distribution. Despite these challenges, Vice continues to expand. International bureaus, documentary series, and lifestyle content proliferate. The company is everywhere. Festivals, campuses, online, and on television. The ambition is global domination. Yet the paradox remains. The more Vice chases scale, the more its authenticity erodes. Its core audience, the early adopters, who valued raw truth, begins to drift. The company's rebellion becomes institutionalized. The collapse does not happen suddenly. It is measured, deliberate, a slow evaporation of control. Revenue models that worked in the mid-2000s fail to keep pace with market realities. Ad dollars are siphoned by larger platforms. Subscription experiments do not offset losses. Operational costs remain high. Cultural relevance begins to waver as the once radical media outlet struggles to define itself in a crowded landscape. By 2020, whispers of instability grow louder. Layoffs, restructuring, and financial scrutiny mark the headlines. Investors pressure management for aggressive solutions. The narrative of a billion-dollar rebel brand now clashes with the reality of shrinking margins, mounting debt, and shifting audience habits. The very foundations of Vice, the balance of audacity and operational discipline, are exposed as fragile under the weight of expansion. The final chapter is predictable, yet still shocking. By 2023, Vice Media files for bankruptcy. From a $5.7 billion valuation to insolvency, the story reads like a cautionary tale of the digital media bubble. Heavy reliance on venture capital, aggressive growth strategies, and failure to adapt in the era of Google and Meta leave the company vulnerable. The empire built on rebellion, curiosity, and counterculture is now a lesson in ambition overtaking ethos. And yet, the story is not just numbers, it is human. The editors, writers, producers, and staff who believed in a vision of audacious journalism are left grappling with failure that is structural, not personal. The founders, once rebels in the basement, are now executives reflecting on decisions that balanced mission and survival, art and growth, rebellion and business. The lessons are subtle but profound. Disruption can be commodified, audacity can be measured, and independence can be mortgaged in pursuit of scale. The Vice story, in its rise and fall, illustrates a modern reality. Digital media is not merely about content. It is a system of incentives, attention economies, investor expectations, and technological displacement. Audacity alone cannot survive the mechanics of growth and monetization. The collapse is not dramatic, it is structural, almost bureaucratic. And in that structure, the echoes of ambition, rebellion, and miscalculated strategy remain. Lessons for the next generation of disruptors. By the end of this chapter, Vice is no longer just a magazine, a website, or a media company. It is a case study, a narrative of audacity colliding with systemic realities. A reminder that rebellion in a market-driven world must negotiate both ethics and economics. The rise and fall are inseparable. The basement beginnings and billion-dollar dreams are part of the same story. A story about vision, risk, and the fragile architecture of modern media empires. New York City, 2017. The skyline glitters with ambition. Glass towers reflect sunlight and the endless hum of commerce. Inside a Manhattan office overlooking the East River, Shane Smith walks past conference rooms filled with suits and screens flashing analytics, clicks, and engagement metrics. The space feels almost alien to the man who once typed out a basement newsletter in Montreal. Now, the newsletter has become a media empire. Vice Media sits at a $5.7 billion valuation, backed by venture capital, hungry for growth and disruption. The room smells faintly of espresso and ambition, but the air carries tension, a subtle anxiety only those who chase billion-dollar dreams recognize. The transformation is astonishing. Vice is everywhere: print, video, online, festivals, branded partnerships. The company that once thrived on subcultures and raw storytelling now measures success in impressions, shares, and monetization strategies. Shane, Sarush, and Gavin, founders who once relied on instinct, are now navigating investor meetings, advertising forecasts, and global media deals. Rebellion has become a corporate strategy. On paper, the story is enviable. High-profile partnerships with major brands, YouTube channels, HBO documentaries, and international bureaus create an image of dominance. Young journalists still see Vice as a dream job, a place where innovation and edgy content coexist. Investors applaud, analysts write glowing profiles, and the company expands its reach into lifestyle, music, and culture. Growth is the mantra, expansion is the mission, success is the narrative. But beneath the surface, a different story is taking shape. The very mechanisms that propelled Vice to prominence are now creating vulnerabilities. Venture capital, once the lifeblood, becomes both oxygen and chain. Each funding round carries expectations, aggressive growth, global reach, increased revenue. Decisions are no longer guided solely by editorial instinct, but by projections, KPIs, and quarterly returns. Ambition begins to weigh like gravity, pulling the founders away from the instincts that built their empire. Internal tensions rise. Editorial teams, once aligned by mission, now feel friction between creativity and corporate priorities. Documentaries that take months of research are pressured to fit advertising windows. Investigative projects, risky by nature, are curtailed in favor of content that guarantees clicks. Original audacity is replaced by calculated risk. The question arises daily: how much rebellion can survive in a boardroom? The digital landscape is shifting even as Vice expands. Google and Meta dominate advertising dollars, their algorithms dictating where attention flows. Social media platforms accelerate content cycles, rewarding immediacy over depth. Vice's once unique content, immersive and thoughtful, now competes with an ecosystem designed for speed and scale. The irony is stark. The more Vice grows, the harder it becomes to maintain the authenticity that drove that growth. 2018 brings warning signs. Revenue growth slows. Operational costs soar. International bureaus require constant funding. High-profile documentaries win acclaim, but fail to generate sustainable profit. Investors grow impatient. The pressure intensifies, manifesting as management reshuffles and aggressive strategies. Layoffs ripple through editorial and production teams, creating morale challenges. The Rebel brand begins to resemble a traditional corporate media company, complete with internal politics and structural inefficiencies. The culture that once defined Vice, the willingness to pursue stories others ignored, the audacity to challenge norms, is now entangled in a paradox. Audacity is profitable only if it scales, but scaling requires compromise. The founders struggle with a dual identity: media disruptors and corporate executives. Every expansion, every new bureau, every investor report adds layers of complexity. Decision-making slows, creativity is constrained, and the ethos of the brand becomes secondary to its valuation. The public begins to notice. Coverage highlights both successes and instability. Reports of internal mismanagement, allegations of harassment, and questionable financial practices surface. While audiences still consume content avidly, the trust and intimacy that defined early Vice begin to erode. Viewers sense a gap between the edgy brand they admired and the corporate entity making calculated choices behind the scenes. By 2019 and 2020, the pandemic intensifies challenges. Advertising revenue, already shifting toward tech giants, drops sharply. Video production is delayed. International offices struggle with remote operations. Subscription experiments and digital monetization models fail to offset losses. Once loyal investors grow anxious, emphasizing efficiency, cost-cutting, and rapid returns. The tension between audacity and survival reaches a tipping point. Behind closed doors, discussions pivot to strategy and restructuring. High-level executives debate mergers, acquisitions, and partnerships, to maintain solvency. Every decision is scrutinized not only for its impact on content, but for its effect on valuations and investor confidence. Creative risks are increasingly replaced by financial calculations. Ambition, once fueled by vision, is now guided by caution. The rebel spirit that defined Vice has become an operational challenge rather than a guiding principle. In the middle of this turbulence, Shane and the founding team confront a stark reality. The empire they built on authenticity and rebellion is under threat from systemic pressures they helped create. The very systems designed to scale, Vice, venture capital, global expansion, advertising reliance, have become vulnerabilities. Growth at all costs, once a mantra of opportunity, now accelerates the company toward structural instability. By 2021 and 2022, the cracks will widen. Revenue fails to meet projections. High-profile layoffs disrupt operations. Partnerships that once promised stability now demand strict adherence to advertiser-friendly content. Stories that once celebrated raw journalism are now filtered through corporate priorities. The rebellion that created a cultural touchstone is constrained by the very systems it relied upon. When bankruptcy is announced in 2023, it feels less like a shock and more like the culmination of decades of structural tension. From $5.7 billion to insolvency, Vice Media becomes a cautionary tale. Audacity cannot be preserved when incentives, funding, and market realities conflict with foundational ethos. The collapse is not the failure of vision, but the failure of structure to sustain it. Systems that measure value purely in financial terms will always challenge cultural risk. Yet the human dimension remains. Journalists, editors, and producers reflect on both achievements and missteps. The founders, once rebels in a basement in Montreal, face the consequences of balancing authenticity with ambition, rebellion with revenue, and counterculture with corporate growth. For them, the bankruptcy is not merely financial, it is philosophical. The lesson is clear. In the digital media world, disruption is fragile. Audacity must negotiate structure, and unchecked growth can undermine the very principles that sparked it. By the end of this chapter, Vice is no longer simply a media company. It is a symbol of ambition confronting reality, a story of audacity colliding with systems optimized for scale, and a warning that digital media, no matter how visionary, is always bound by the pressures of growth, monetization, and structural incentives. The rise is inseparable from the fall, and both are part of a single narrative, a cautionary tale for the age of billion-dollar valuations and venture-funded dreams. New York City, 2023. The offices are empty now. Desks once cluttered with scripts, storyboards, and laptops sit abandoned. Hallways echo with silence instead of debate. Outside, the city moves on, oblivious to the empire that rose, dominated, and crumbled almost invisibly. For those who lived through Vice's story, the collapse is both tangible and abstract, measured in spreadsheets and layoffs, but also in lost culture, fractured trust, and the dissolution of a dream. For Shane Smith and the founders, reflection is inevitable. The basement in Montreal feels distant, almost mythic, a symbol of freedom that could not survive the pressures of scale. They remember a time when audacity alone fueled growth, when stories mattered more than metrics, and rebellion was instinct, not strategy. That instinct, once their greatest asset, became increasingly incompatible with billion-dollar expectations. Every investor meeting, every boardroom discussion, every pressure to monetize, chipped away at the culture they had nurtured. The employees left behind carry another story. Writers who once chased stories on the edge now navigate severance packages and uncertainty. Producers who filmed immersive documentaries grapple with the knowledge that creative risk is often subordinate to financial stability. The rebellion that inspired a generation is now a case study, analyzed for lessons on leadership, growth, and misaligned incentives. The digital media landscape, meanwhile, has moved forward without them. Algorithms dictate what is consumed. Tech giants dominate advertising. Platforms monetize attention more efficiently than independent outlets ever could. In this environment, Vice's collapse is both a warning and a reminder. Authenticity and audacity cannot survive in isolation from structural realities. Passion alone cannot pay salaries, fund global bureaus, or compete with algorithmic dominance. Yet, the legacy persists. The ethos of storytelling, the willingness to explore subcultures, the courage to disrupt traditional media, these are embedded in the DNA of digital journalism. Former Vice creators carry lessons into new ventures, independent media, and even corporate newsrooms, ensuring that the spirit of rebellion informs future storytelling. The collapse does not erase impact, it transforms it. Ultimately, Vice Media's story is a mirror of ambition meeting reality. It illustrates the fragility of growth at all costs, the risks of reliance on venture capital, and the challenges of maintaining cultural authenticity in a market-driven world. The empire built on audacity became a cautionary tale, but one rich with insight. For creators, investors, and media visionaries, the lesson is clear. Systems, incentives, and structures matter as much as ideas, courage, and talent. In the silence of empty offices, among the echoes of abandoned projects, the story of Vice reminds the world that disruption can inspire, but survival requires balance. Vision without structure is fragile. Rebellion without discipline is ephemeral. And in the age of digital media, the difference between being remembered and being forgotten is not audacity alone. It is the architecture that supports it.